You feel it, don't you? That uncomfortable squirm when someone mentions your flaws. That immediate urge to defend, to explain, to justify who you are and who you're not. What if I told you that everything you're desperately trying to hide from the world is actually a treasure map to your purpose? What if your deepest shame isn't your weakness, but your greatest strength wearing a disguise so convincing that even you fell for it? You've been living a lie. Not the kind of lie you tell others, but the kind you tell yourself. The lie that says you must be good, acceptable, perfect. The lie that whispers your darkness makes you unlovable. The lie that convinces you to cut away pieces of yourself until you're left with a hollow shell of who you think you should be. But here's what no one tells you about self-development and psychology. The parts of yourself you've been taught to overcome, suppress, and transcend aren't obstacles to your authenticity. They're not bugs in your psychological programming. They're features. They're the raw materials of your individual genius, the building blocks of your unique contribution to this world. Every trigger that sets you off, every shadow aspect you deny, every uncomfortable truth you refuse to face is actually your unconscious mind desperately trying to hand you the keys to your destiny. You think you're protecting yourself by rejecting these parts, but you're actually exiling the very aspects of your psyche that contain your most potent creative power. You see, Carl Jung understood something that most people spend their entire lives running from. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's not some dark force trying to sabotage your success or poison your relationships. Your shadow is your exiled genius, your abandoned potential, your disowned magnificence waiting to come home. Stop for a moment and think about the person who triggers you most intensely. Feel that familiar rise of irritation, that surge of judgment, that immediate need to distance yourself from their behavior. What if I told you that person isn't randomly pushing your buttons? What if they're actually a messenger, delivering a piece of your lost self that you've been unconsciously searching for your entire life? This isn't some new age nonsense about everyone being your mirror. This is precise, clinical psychology backed by decades of research into human consciousness and individuation. Your most intense reactions aren't random emotional responses. They're your psyche's sophisticated detection system, alerting you to the exact qualities, energies, and capacities you've disowned within yourself. The very thing you judge most harshly in others is the very thing you've banned from your own personality, and that banishment, that internal exile, is exactly what's keeping you from accessing your full creative potential, your authentic purpose, your genuine power. Stop. Don't scroll. Don't click away. You're at a crossroads right now, and you already know which path you're going to choose. The fact that you've watched this far proves something about you. You're not like the 97% who click away at the first uncomfortable truth. You're part of the 3% who actually want to evolve. Here's what's happening in your brain right now. You're recognizing yourself in these ideas. Jung called this individuation, and once it starts, it cannot be stopped. The hidden self isn't just a channel, it's your psychological home, your turning point. The place where your deepest questions finally get answers. You have 10 seconds to decide. Are you the person who watches but never commits? Or are you someone who actually follows through? Don't think. Just click subscribe. Now prove you're serious. Everyone who truly gets it comments the same thing. I am the 3%. If you don't comment this, you already know what that says about you. Your unconscious mind already made the decision. Your finger is already moving toward the button. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't. Welcome to the hidden self. Let's continue. You built a prison around yourself, and you called it self-improvement. You took every uncomfortable emotion, every socially unacceptable impulse, every politically incorrect thought, and you locked them away in the basement of your consciousness. You told yourself this was growth. You told yourself this was evolution. You told yourself this was the path to love and acceptance. But what you actually created was a psychological civil war. What you actually built was a personality so sanitized, so carefully curated, so desperately acceptable that it has no real substance, no authentic power, no genuine magnetism. You became a performance of a person instead of an actual person. Think about your daily internal experience. How much of your mental energy goes toward monitoring your thoughts, editing your words, managing your image? How much of your creative capacity is consumed by the exhausting task of being someone you think you should be instead of someone you actually are? You police your anger because you think it makes you ugly. You suppress your selfishness because you think it makes you bad. You hide your jealousy because you think it makes you small. You deny your ambition because you think it makes you arrogant. You bury your sexuality because you think it makes you inappropriate. You mask your vulnerability because you think it makes you weak. And in doing so, you've exiled your passion, your boundaries, your competitive edge, your drive, your aliveness, your humanity. You've created a perfectly acceptable person who has no access to their own life force. You've become so committed to being good that you've forgotten how to be real. Here's the devastating truth about shadow work that most self-development content won't tell you. Your personality isn't a fixed thing that you optimize. Your personality is a creative project that requires all of your psychological raw materials. When you reject parts of yourself, you don't become more refined. You become more limited. You don't become more lovable. You become more forgettable. The person you're trying to be doesn't actually exist. It's a fantasy constructed from other people's expectations, social conditioning, and your own fear of rejection. And every day you spend trying to become this fantasy person is a day you spend moving further away from your authentic purpose and genuine power. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're actually starving yourself. You think you're becoming more acceptable, but you're actually becoming more invisible. You think you're growing, but you're actually shrinking. Your emotional triggers aren't random. They're not evidence of your lack of spiritual evolution or psychological maturity. They're not signs that you need more therapy, more meditation, more self-control. Your triggers are your psyche's sophisticated guidance system, pointing you toward the exact aspects of yourself that you need to reclaim to access your full creative potential. Every person who irritates you, every behavior that disgusts you, every quality that you find absolutely intolerable in others is your unconscious mind holding up a mirror and saying, "Here, this is the part of you that you rejected. This is the energy you need to become whole. This is the power you gave away." But you've been trained to see triggers as problems to solve instead of messages to decode. You've been taught to work on your reactions instead of understanding what they're revealing. You've been convinced that being triggered means something is wrong with you, when actually it means something is trying to become right with you. Let me walk you through the mechanics of psychological projection. When you encounter someone whose behavior triggers an intense emotional response in you, your unconscious mind isn't randomly firing off chemicals. It's recognizing a disowned aspect of your own psyche and alerting you to its presence through the mechanism of judgment and emotional reactivity. The stronger your reaction, the more significant the disowned aspect. The more you hate it in them, the more desperately you need to integrate it in yourself. The more you judge it as wrong, the more it contains the raw material for your creative breakthrough. You think the goal is to stop being triggered, but the actual goal is to understand what your triggers are trying to teach you about the parts of yourself you've abandoned. You think the solution is to avoid triggering people, But the actual solution is to thank them for showing you exactly where your lost power is hiding. Consider the person who triggers you most consistently. Is it their confidence that you find arrogant? Your abandoned self-advocacy is calling. Is it their emotional expression that you find dramatic? Your exiled aliveness is knocking. Is it their boundary setting that you find selfish? Your disowned self-care is trying to come home. This isn't about becoming the worst version of that person. This isn't about adopting their destructive patterns or toxic behaviors. This is about recognizing the healthy core of the energy they represent and finding your own authentic way to express it. Your triggers are your treasure map. Your judgments are your guidance system. Your emotional reactions are your internal GPS, constantly redirecting you toward the aspects of yourself that you need to reclaim to become fully alive, fully creative, fully yourself. Here's the radical reframe that changes everything. Your shadow isn't a collection of your worst traits. Your shadow is a collection of your disowned superpowers. Every quality you've rejected, every energy you've suppressed, every aspect of yourself you've deemed unacceptable isn't actually bad. It's actually powerful. And power that's been rejected, denied, and pushed into the unconscious doesn't disappear. It goes underground and becomes distorted. Your repressed anger doesn't become peace. It becomes passive aggression, self-sabotage, and chronic resentment. Your denied selfishness doesn't become generosity. It becomes martyrdom, boundary violations, and covert manipulation. Your suppressed sexuality doesn't become purity. It becomes shame, repression, and projected judgment. Your hidden arrogance doesn't become humility. It becomes false modesty, imposter syndrome, and self-abandonment. But here's where it gets interesting. When you consciously integrate these shadow aspects, when you reclaim them as valid parts of your psychological wholeness, they transform back into their original power. Your integrated anger becomes your passion, your boundaries, your ability to say no. Your integrated selfishness becomes your self-care, your ambition, your ability to prioritize your own needs. Your integrated sexuality becomes your creativity, your magnetism, your life force energy. Your integrated arrogance becomes your confidence, your self-worth, your ability to own your gifts. This is why Jung called it shadow work instead of shadow elimination. You don't get rid of these aspects, you get conscious of them. You don't overcome them, you integrate them. You don't transcend them, you dance with them. And when you start dancing with your shadow instead of fighting it, something magical happens. You become interesting instead of perfect. You become magnetic instead of acceptable. You become powerful instead of nice. You become whole instead of good. People who do authentic shadow work don't become more socially acceptable. They become more genuinely attractive. They don't become easier to be around. They become more worth being around. They don't become less complex. They become more fascinating. Your purpose isn't hiding in your perfection. Your purpose is hiding in your complexity. Your gifts aren't found in your light. Your gifts are found in your willingness to embrace your entire spectrum of human experience and expression. The person you're trying to become by rejecting your shadow is actually the person everyone forgets. The person you become by integrating your shadow is the person no one can ignore. Shadow integration isn't about becoming a worse person. It's about becoming a whole person. It's not about acting out every impulse or justifying destructive behavior. It's about consciously owning all aspects of your psyche so they can serve your highest expression instead of sabotaging it from the unconscious. Here's how the alchemy actually works. You start by identifying your most intense judgments about other people. You make a list of the qualities, behaviors, and characteristics that trigger your strongest emotional reactions. These aren't random irritations. These are precise indicators of your disowned psychological gold. Then you ask yourself the question that most people are too afraid to ask. How is this quality present in me? Not how you act it out destructively, but how it exists as a valid aspect of your psychological makeup. Your judgment of someone's arrogance might be pointing to your own disowned confidence. Your irritation with someone's emotional expression might be revealing your own suppressed aliveness. Your disgust with someone's selfishness might be showing you your own abandoned self-care. The key is to find the healthy core of each shadow aspect. Arrogance, when integrated, becomes authentic confidence. Drama, when integrated, becomes emotional aliveness. Selfishness, when integrated, becomes healthy self-prioritization. Manipulation, when integrated, becomes strategic thinking. Aggression, when integrated, becomes passionate advocacy. You're not trying to become the shadow. You're trying to consciously access the power that the shadow contains. You're not trying to act out destructively. You're trying to express constructively what you've been repressing unconsciously. This process requires what Jung called holding the tension of the opposites. You have to be willing to discover that you contain contradictions. You have to be comfortable with the fact that you're both generous and selfish, both humble and arrogant, both peaceful and aggressive, both vulnerable and powerful. Most people can't handle this psychological complexity. They need to see themselves as consistently good, perpetually growing, always improving. But individuation requires you to accept that you're a human being, not a self-improvement project. And human beings contain the full spectrum of psychological possibilities. When you stop trying to be a perfectly consistent person and start being an authentically complex person, you access creative possibilities that were completely unavailable to your sanitized self. Your art becomes more compelling. Your relationships become more genuine. Your work becomes more impactful. Your presence becomes more magnetic. You want to know what authentic power actually looks like? It's not the power to control your image, manage your reputation, or maintain your persona. It's the power to be fully yourself in any situation without apology, explanation, or performance. It's the power to express your truth, own your desires, and honor your complexity without needing external validation or approval. Authentic power is what happens when you stop trying to be likable and start being memorable. When you stop trying to be perfect and start being real. When you stop trying to be good and start being whole. People with integrated shadows don't need to prove anything to anyone because they're not hiding anything from themselves. They don't need to manage their image because they're not ashamed of their humanity. They don't need to perform acceptability because they've accepted themselves completely. This is why authentic people are simultaneously the most polarizing and the most magnetic. They don't trigger mild responses. They inspire intense reactions. Some people are drawn to their realness like moths to a flame. Other people are threatened by their wholeness and react with judgment, criticism, or rejection. But here's what's fascinating. When you're no longer afraid of being disliked, you become profoundly more likable to the people who matter. When you're no longer performing for approval, you attract people who appreciate authenticity. When you're no longer hiding your complexity, you connect with people who can handle depth. Your integrated shadow becomes your creative signature. It becomes the unique flavor of your personality, the distinctive quality of your presence, the magnetic characteristic that makes you unforgettable. It becomes the very thing that allows you to stand out in a world full of people trying to fit in. This is where your purpose lives. Not in your perfection, but in your willingness to be imperfect. Not in your light, but in your courage to own your darkness. Not in your consistency, but in your authentic complexity. The world doesn't need another perfect person. The world needs you to be courageously, unapologetically, magnificently yourself, all of yourself, including the parts you've been convinced are unacceptable. Your purpose isn't something you find by becoming better. Your purpose is something you unleash by becoming whole. And becoming whole requires you to reclaim every aspect of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or disowned. The person you're trying to become already exists. They're waiting for you to stop performing and start being. They're waiting for you to stop hiding and start revealing. They're waiting for you to stop rejecting your shadow and start dancing with your darkness. Your shadow isn't your obstacle. Your shadow is your superpower. Your darkness isn't your weakness. Your darkness is your strength in disguise. Your rejected self isn't your problem. Your rejected self holds the master key to your destiny. The most profound act of self-love isn't accepting your light. It's embracing your darkness. The most radical form of personal growth isn't becoming someone new. It's becoming someone complete. The most powerful expression of your purpose isn't transcending your humanity. It's celebrating your complexity. You have a choice right now. You can continue the exhausting performance of being acceptable, spending your precious life energy trying to become someone you think you should be. Or you can begin the exhilarating journey of shadow integration, reclaiming all the power you've given away and becoming the magnificently complex, authentically powerful, undeniably magnetic person you actually are. Stop trying to overcome your shadow. Start dancing with your darkness. Stop trying to transcend your humanity. Start celebrating your complexity. Stop trying to be good. Start being whole. Your shadow is calling. Your darkness is knocking. Your rejected self is standing at the door with the master key to your destiny in their hand. The only question is, are you brave enough to let them in? If you're ready to stop running from your shadow and start reclaiming your power, comment, "I choose wholeness" below. Let's build a community of people who are brave enough to be real, complex enough to be interesting, and whole enough to change the world. This is just the beginning of your individuation journey. Your shadow work isn't a one-time revelation. It's a lifelong dance with the depths of your own consciousness. And every step of that dance brings you closer to the person you were always meant to be. The person who doesn't hide from their darkness, but transforms it into light. The person who doesn't reject their shadow, but integrates it into their power. The person who doesn't perform their acceptability, but radiates their authenticity. Your rejected self has been waiting your entire life for this moment. The moment when you stop seeing them as the enemy and start recognizing them as the hero of your story. The moment when you stop fighting your shadow and start dancing with your destiny. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.